So welcome to the New York City PowerShell Meetup. I'm your host, Doug Finke, and I'll also be presenting today. I talk about PowerShell, I talk about Copilot, I talk about other Microsoft tools, I talk about AI, and many other things. So today I'm really looking forward to talking about the new AI assistant that OpenAI dropped about a month ago. And I'll be demoing a new module I wrote for it. So I have a PowerShell AI module that works with what they had, and then this new PowerShell module is going to work with AI Assistant. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's been a lot of fun to build, a lot of fun to play with. Also, next year, I'm going to start hosting something called the PowerShell Pulse. It's going to be a monthly Tech Talk community showcase. So I'll be looking for like 4 folks a month that want to showcase a project or some things they're working on, or some technology that integrates with PowerShell, et cetera. Do 15-minute talks. So I'll be doing that starting in February. Let's get started. Now, just remember that when I do these particular live streams, I collect a bunch of ideas that I'm working on. So this is not like I just got Grok yesterday. Excellent, congratulations. I've been looking for mine all morning. So Grok is, for folks who don't know, Grok is the new X platform AI integration that, for better or worse, Elon Musk has put out. It's a competition to GPT-4. It's brand new. It's about a GPT-3.5, I hear, in terms of capability. But I'm sure within a month or so, they are going to be up to speed with more bells and whistles. The cool thing about Grok is it has access to real-time data. So, hey, check my video. What video is that? Or do we have to remove you as well? Yeah, I think I'm going to remove you just in case. So Grok has access to, sorry, just focusing on removing things. So Grok has access to the X platform, so it has access to real-time data, something that GPT-4 does not. So that's going to make, we'll see how that plays out. It's going to be very interesting to see what it comes up with. So what I'm going to demo today, I'm going to talk about the AI assistant that OpenAI dropped, I guess, at the beginning of November at the OpenAI Dev Days, their first one that they did since the company has gone live over a number of years. So they showed off some stuff called AI Assistant. It's an upgrade to the API that they had. They do a lot of cool things for you. Super useful for developers or people wanting to use their tools. I'm going to go through and show that. So I've wrapped a bunch of those, or most of their API, in PowerShell, as I did with the PowerShell AI with the ChatGPT web. And I'm going to demo that for you. And maybe I shouldn't give this disclaimer, but this is me just whacking things together at this point. Although the module is pretty tight, I have tests for it. I've been testing it for several weeks. As I've been building it and coming up with ideas or seeing how they use it, seeing if I can use it the same way. But my demos today, I don't really make it polished like as if I was going to do it at a conference. But it's still really worth it and fun to do and fun to watch. So first up, I'm going to do something called, the code's on the left, but I'm going to drop it in a terminal so you can interact with this new features of OpenAI from the command line, which I think is really cool. Not only is it cool, but Python people shouldn't have all the fun. So when OpenAI drops stuff and gives new features out, it's usually all in their OpenAI. All their OpenAI stuff is in their Python SDK. So I tell you, it's a good day for people to be. That's it. Nobody else coming in today. So I'm getting rid of one more person. Where was I? Yeah, so Python people get to use this all from the console. I believe they are supporting a TypeScript version. I'm not sure about that, maybe JavaScript, but there's numerous SDKs that are wrapping this as well as the previous versions. Of course, the previous versions are well wrapped at this point. They have C#, Go, Rust, all the different languages, PHP, JavaScript, so on and so forth. So I figure I want to have some fun in a language that I enjoy, which is PowerShell. So first up, what we're going to do I'm gonna create a new assistant, right? So I've used all the verb noun pieces that we're familiar with in PowerShell. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the latest heat. I'm going to use this model, which is the GPT-4 1106 preview, which is the fastest, most accurate model out of OpenAI. And I'm going to give it instructions, right? You are an expert in geography. So I'm building a geography tutor app, so to speak. And if you're familiar with ChatGPT Web, there are things like custom instructions that you can set up. This is along those lines. If you're familiar with my PowerShell OpenAI module, their previous versions, there's 4 different messages you can send to the OpenAI models in the back end. They're either system messages. I'll tell you, people have nothing better to do. Well, I'm going to get interrupted a little more. I apologize. We have another bomb. And we'll just take these folks out one at a time. So where was I? So yeah, so you can do 4 different kinds of messages to the models on the back end. You can do system messages, assistant messages, user messages, and functions. So you can think of the instructions as being a system message. It basically sets up the steerability of Master Z was Zoom bombing. You should lock down the meeting if possible. Yeah, I'm just not going to let anybody else in at this point, but that's a good, thanks, Leo, I agree. So I'm basically setting up, I'm steering the model and telling it it's an expert in geography to be helpful and concise. Okay, that's a one-time shot. And then we'll go on and see what happens next. So I'm going to copy that and paste it into the command line. And that actually talked to the server, create an assistant. I can print out the assistant, and this is what comes back from the model. It gives me an ID, shows me the kind of object it is. There's the model I chose, the instructions, and there's a few other things you can supply, like a name, file IDs, tools. We might get to see that in a bit. Now, so working with the assistant is one of the primitives. Another primitive, there's actually 4 in total. The next primitive is a thread. So you can think of a thread as being a chat, right? So every chat that you have, every time you want to chat with the models in the back end, you create a thread. That's almost 100% true. Sometimes you can reuse a thread. And here's Stefan. So I know this person. We'll let Stefan in. So now there's a thread, and there's nothing on the thread right now. So there's little information. And you see we have an ID, it tells us the object type. So these are 2 primitives that we're working with. Now, next up, what we're going to do is we're going to create a message. Okay. And the message is a new OAI message, right? That's the PowerShell piece that I built. It wraps now if you were doing this in curl or in Python, you would have, there's a whole bunch of pieces you have to set in terms of the headers, you're going to post or get, all that kind of stuff. So I wrap all that, make it even easier, and PowerShell is really amenable to that. It makes our lives simple. So we're going to do a new OAI for OpenAI message. I'm going to pass in the thread ID that I just created, right? Thread.id. Going to name the role user. There's only one at this point that we can have. And the content or the prompt is, what is the capital of France? So nothing happens, right? Or shouldn't say that. What does happen is the server all gets set up at the server, and we now created that message on that thread of what is the capital of France. So the next primitive we want to do, because we want to actually get a response back, is I'm going to do a run. So there's a new OAI run, and I'm going to pass in the thread ID, and I'm going to pass in the assistant ID that we initially created, right? And let's take a look at that. Now, what you'll notice is, okay, we get a run object. There's our assistant ID and our thread ID, and you can see the status is queued. We'll get to it in a second. And it has a bunch of other information about what this run is. So now this is running on the OpenAI servers. So what's interesting about that is this works offline, meaning I could actually sit here, set up a bunch of threads, create some messages, attach them to assistants, and then say, go off and run. go do your thing. And I can then turn my machine off and it's gonna go ahead and work. I can come back later and I can grab the threads and I can grab the messages on the threads. So it's a whole new way of doing things. Before you actually had to, sorry, we still have some lingerers. Before you'd have to actually maintain all this stuff in that state locally, you have to keep all these messages in an array. And as you start to interact with it, you have to keep appending to that array and passing that entire bucket back to the server. Now, excuse me, now what happens is OpenAI handles all that for you. So the run actually loads up the model, right? So here we're using GTP4, the latest. It loads up all the messages in the thread. It'll truncate the messages to fit the model context. So remember that these models, initially they were 4K models and then 8K and then 16, 32, and now 128. But if you're working with a 16K or a 32K, one because of performance as well as for cost, if you start coming close to the 32 or you hit the 32K limit, when you send your next set of messages, it'll come back and say, sorry, you've maxed out your token window and you have to go do something. So now this model, this approach that they've offered handles all of the model truncating intelligently. And you don't have to do it as a developer. On top of that, so once all that's done, it packages up everything, loads the model, it calls the model, and then it saves the result back on the thread. So let's go take a look and see if we can get the message from what we did. Hopefully you remember what message I sent, right? I said, what's the capital of France? So I used the get OAI message, and I gave it a thread ID. So I try to model these types of these modules that I create in PowerShell after our verb noun, what we're familiar with inside of PowerShell. And there's some pieces, for example, like get child item. I try to model it conceptually that way. That way it's less thinking on our part when we walk up to this as something new to work with. So out of the box, you can start saying, oh, well, what's in this module? There's a whole bunch of OAI stuff, but I can do gets and sets and news and you're off to the races. So I went, got the messages. So let's take a look at what's on there. So this is what comes back from the server. And I'm working on a better, this is a raw dump of what comes back, just to show you how it works. And I'm working on abstractions to make this easier so you can actually get back the details you want. And if you need to, you can expand them when that's needed. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say data, right? And you can see here, I've got two messages. One is the user message, right? The one on the bottom. And I have assistant message, right? So this is what I sent up, and we'll take a look at that in a second. And the assistant is what came back from the model after we did the run. So what does that mean? So if I come up here and I'll just grab the first one, right? And that's the assistant, and we can take a look at content. And there you see the capital of France is Paris. And I can look at text and that value, right? And if I take off the subscript, I want to look at both messages, just try and take off the subscript. Okay, you can see that the capital of France is Paris was the capital of France. Now this is in reverse order, in descending order, so it's easier for you to grab what you need if you're consistently interacting and doing, let's say, build a command line chatbot, right? You don't want to have to keep grabbing all the data, going down to the bottom, even though that's kind of easy to do array slicing. One of the ways that you can make this a little different, on this message, I can actually, there's an order function, and I can say ASC for ascending, and then I can print out the values, and now you can see the conversation in chronological order. So what is the capital of France? The capital of France is Paris, right? So there's a bunch of comments in here, but this is about 20, if that many, 20 lines of code, and you're interacting with the model, and you don't even know you are. You're setting up an assistant, you create a thread, you put a message on it, you run it, you get the results. So why is this better than the previous API? So with the new Assistants API, I don't have to store any messages in my own database. That's what we had to do before. In fact, if you look at how PowerShell AI works, I'm actually storing it in an XML file, a CLI XML. I'm actually converting the messages from the array and saving it so I can actually crack them open later and send them off. OpenAI handles the truncating, which I was not doing in the PowerShell AI module at the moment. That was the next set of plans, but this is going to be the newer version that I'm going to use. The model output is generated even if you're disconnected, which is cool. So you can kick off a bunch of these, disconnect, and come back later to get your information. Super useful if you're using things like Azure Functions or something like a GitHub Action, just as examples of where you might want to apply that. And you can always get the messages out of the model, the output later. They're always saved in the thread. So as long as you have the thread ID, there's a whole bunch of ways to get that. You can come back at any time and you can retrieve this information. So this is they've actually created a pure cloud-based solution for interacting with models in a programmatic way. A little bit different than the competition. So let's take a look at any questions or thoughts, or feel free to jump in with that if you want. Happy to take this in any direction. I know this is a bunch of new stuff for people to see for the first time, but I'm sure if anybody has questions, other people have the same questions as well. So I just boiled that whole last file, I boiled it down to these 17 lines of code. And the key difference here is I do the same on line 7, I run it, but then I'm going to go and grab the status, right? So I didn't show this before, that you can get the OAI run item, right? Pass in a thread and a run ID, and then I can check the status, and there's a status on the status, right? And I can see if it's not equal to complete, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to poll, I'm going to loop, and I'm going to go get the status again. I'm going to sleep for a half second, and then I'm going to check it. If it's not completed, I'll just keep spinning around till it happens. Now, I didn't put a spinner in there in this version, but let's see what happens when I run this. So now this is completely unattended. And here it is, it's waiting in that loop, and there it is. So I just recreated everything we just did. So it created the assistant, created a thread, created a message, ran it, and then it polled and said, okay, am I completed yet? And then I come back with a response. This is how you'd start beginning to create a chatbot, okay? And again, I've got a PowerShell SDK, so this is how you'd use the same approach as you would within Python or TypeScript or whatever other SDKs are beginning to wrap this. So as people come up with ideas, you can start to take those and try to apply them here. I will definitely have more examples. I did a chatbot with the old version. I will do a chatbot with this and post that at some point. So Julian says, have you come across incorrect answers, hallucinations when interacting with the assistant models? Absolutely. So none of the models are 100% hallucination free, kind of like us humans. In fact, I didn't wear my t-shirt today. It says, I hallucinate more than ChatGPT. So yeah, you have to still, depending on would I put some of this stuff in production with this particular model? No. But as you move to something like Azure OpenAI services, okay, where you can fine tune and you can tweak the models and do certain types of moderation, those I would put in production. These raw ones, no. But this is an excellent place to get into a sandbox, start playing with this, start figuring this stuff out, because, it's in my opinion, and I'm pretty opinionated about ChatGPT, this is the future. So the sooner you can get involved, the better, if you want to try and build these kinds of systems. Question from Ian. Can I do get content and upload an entire file as part of the instruction? Dude, you're jumping ahead of my demo. Great question. Let's see, what do I have? Yes, well, let's take a look at that coming up. So this is how simple it is. Now I can sit here. So the great questions, I appreciate the really great questions. Let's take a look at that. And then Merlin's got a question. What's the memory capacity of threads? Is it X amount of the tokens or something else? Good question. What's the memory? So I'm going to go with that as the token. So depending on the model that you use, it's limited to that token size, which is why it's important to know that it will truncate. So as you're doing this and adding more messages, like if I was having a conversation where I kept adding stuff, and of course, as the information comes back from the assistant, those gets added to the token count. So when you start running more of it, The server side will actually truncate those messages, keep the key aspects of the conversation, but will truncate the messages so you're not going to hit that token limit. So whatever the model's limit is, 32K, whatever it's going to be, but now you have the ability that OpenAI servers are going to manage the context for you. Hope that answers the question. So yeah, it's pretty cool. That's why this new stuff is better. And not only does it give us more capability and features, but it's also taking care of a lot of the underpinnings. In fact, it's kind of interesting to me that they use the words like thread and run. I think a couple of weeks back, I posted on X and I said, this is starting, I'm from the mainframe days. I started in the mainframe, and this is something we call job entry subsystem. Used to start a job, stop a job, get information from a job. This feels very much like the old JCL days. That's my mindset. It's also, if you look at this is how start job works in PowerShell, right? If you can start it, you can start a job and come back and get the results later. Yeah, if you turn your machine off and on, you have a challenge. That's one of the benefits of this cloud-based concept here. You can kick these things off. You can kick it off on your phone. Disconnect and then go home and get on your machine and check out your stuff. You get your messages that way, or programmatically have this work that way as well. So, yeah. I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but anyway. So that's it in 17 lines of code. So now I can actually sit here, and if I wanted, I can come up here in my tutor all code. I can put a param up here if I wanted, right? And I can then say, I can set up the instructions to say something different than make this a parameter I can replace, so the instructions are different. And I can also then change what is the capital of France. I can make that a parameter, call it $prompt, put that in there. And then I have a PS1 file that I can just change the instructions every time, or I can pin it to a specific assistant if I wanted to. Won't have to create it each time. And once these assistants get created, they persist. So all your prompts and instructions stay around forever until you delete them. But I can actually then change the instructions and the prompt and just have a little bit of just a simple 20-line piece of code that I can just ask questions about anything I wanted to. And I can ground and steer the model with instructions, and then I can prompt away. But even better will be doing this as, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, doing this in a chat bot, right? So, which I'm not going to show today. Dion asks, is this multi-threading possible? And will that impact the token limit? Great question. Well, it is multi-threaded, right? But it happens all on the server, right? It doesn't happen on the computer that you're working with, whether it's be a phone or a mobile phone or your desktop or a laptop or an iPad or whatever, right? It all happens in the cloud. So does it affect the limit? Absolutely. But then again, we come back to when you start doing the run, right? So go back to these notes here. Okay. OpenAI handles the truncating of messages, right? So everything up on the server, as I start adding to the prompt or adding to the conversation and getting responses, OpenAI is handling truncating that message so the limit is not impacted. And it's all happening on their servers, so the threading is all that you want it to be. Now, if I wanted to, right, so here I'm only doing a single thread. I'm saying on line 11, I'm saying thread equal new. I could do 50 of them, and those are threads ready to go. And then I can kick off 50 runs, and those are going to happen in parallel, or they're going to get queued and then they're going to get run. And I don't have to handle any of that management. All happens on the OpenAI client or backend servers. Cool, good questions. Let's move on. You're welcome. Thanks for the question. So let's move on to, so now what I'm going to do, so this is to the question before, to Ian, can you upload an entire text file? Absolutely can. So let's take a look at that. So I have something called an invoke OAI upload, right? Oops. So let's try and get this right again. Invoke OAI photo file, right? And I'm going to see if I can do it right here. / what did I call it? I think language, yep. So I'm going to upload see if I can spell. Oh, sorry. I renamed it to 03. So the language models are unsupervised multitask learners. I'm going to upload this PDF. But I'm going to take you one step further. So yes, you can upload. So that's what's cool. I've got an abstraction where you can say, here's a file, create an assistant on the fly for me, and then wire these things together. Because once you upload a file, it sits there, but you have to take the file ID and connect it either to a message or a thread. So there's scoping that you can do either at the assistant level or the thread level to do different things. So if you don't, so if somebody's new's coming in, they want to use your assistant, right? Let's say that the assistant does some general stuff, but you don't want to attach your personal files to that assistant. You can attach it just to the thread that you're talking about. So I have a couple of abstractions that handle that. But instead of doing it that way, what I'm going to do is we're going to pop over. I have something called show, and you can just find this kind of stuff on the web itself, right? But since I always go to the OA show OpenAI, I go to these web pages. I just made some functions out of it, so I can either go to the reference page, the API reference page, the playground, or I can go to the assistant page. So let's go to the assistant page, and hopefully it launches a browser. All right, cool. And I'm going to go to my other browser in a moment. So this is, so if you can search for the platform openai.com and you can find everything I'm doing here. You don't need the module to do that. So that's all up there. Now you can see here, I have two assistants that I created. The first example I ran, and then I compacted all the code into one file. So both of those actually created an assistant each time. I could have reused the assistant, no problem. You can come over here, you can edit it, you can clone it, you can delete it. And all of these pieces, except I'm working on the clone, they don't really have an API for that. So I'm working on an abstraction that handles cloning it or copying it, just like a file. But you can, if you wanted to, you can edit the different parameters on it. And I'm going to go over and I'm going to test this particular one. Actually, yeah, so I can test it in the playground. So when I did the new thread and I did the new message, if I type a message in here, whatever it would be, and hit add run, it'll create the thread, attach the message, attach it to the assistant, and then run and show the answers. I'm going to show you that, but I'm going to do it over here. I'm going to create a new assistant. And see if I can, you don't have to watch me type if I can get this right. So the instructions are, you are a personal math tutor. We'll name it math tutor. And you're a personal math tutor. Answer questions briefly in a sentence or less. Okay. And I'm going to set the model. We'll set it to GPT, right? So there's several models you can choose from. And again, this is the newest one. I'm going to add a file. Let's go grab, let's see what we got. And we're going to grab this PDF. Okay, so all this can be done from the command line. And this is how you would do it in the web page. Once everything's done at the command line, it all, except for the messages, everything shows up in here in terms of the assistant setup, so on and so forth. So now I've named it. I've set the model. I've uploaded a file, and I'm going to turn on retrieval. Okay, and then I'm going to click save. So retrieval means this is all the new RAG stuff that everybody's talking about. And that's the retrieval augmented generation capabilities for LLMs. Basically what this does is this is all in beta, right? So this first version, this retrieval will take that PDF and it will create the embeddings for you, so on and so forth. Next version is coming out, you'll be able to fine tune, so to speak, or choose what kind of embeddings you want, what kind of search indexes and all that kind of stuff on the particular files that you upload. There's a limit to the number of files. There's a limit to the number of megabytes you can upload. I uploaded this to the assistant level, but you can also add this over here. You can see there's a file, right? I can also upload it on just a thread. So if multiple people are using your assistant, they can be just having their threads and they can actually attach the files they want just to their thread that nobody else sees, just them. At the assistant level, this could be, maybe it's an HR document that everybody wants to say, hey, are these classes on the list of refundables? So to recap, named it Math Tutor. You're a personal math tutor, gave it a model, do the retrieval, uploaded a file, and let's see what we're going to ask. Let's ask the question, what are some of the cool math concepts in this ML paper? PDF, explain in 2 sentences. So off we go. So this is the user interaction. It's using the same REST API that I tied the PowerShell SDK to. So this is using the same one. So what that allows you to do, or if you use your imagination, you can see that you can skin applications any way you want. You want to run a PHP version, go grab the PHP SDK, and you can write a web page, or if you want to do it in TypeScript or whatever, using JavaScript, etc. If you want to do it in a command line, you can do the same things. So notice it says user, and here's the math tutor that I grabbed from the name of the assistant. So it shows the prompt that you sent up, and it comes back, and this is the answer from the tutor itself. All this stuff, I'll show you that in a second, is accessible through the SDK, all the SDKs that wrap it correctly. So here's a bunch of information, gave me more than I wanted. But what's really cool is you can see it does citations. So the citations are, you can render this whatever way you want. So it's citing actual pieces inside the document. And it's a custom document, right? It had no knowledge of this beforehand. Now, I'm going to grab the thread ID up here. Let's copy that, go to the command line, and I'm going to say, see if I can get this off, OAI message, OAI message, and I'm going to say, here's the thread ID, and I copied, so I ran all that up from the web page, and I just got back all that information. So let's store that in a variable. We'll take a look at data, okay, and we'll take a look at the first one, because it's from the assistant. We'll take a look at content. And here it starts to say, we can see the response. Grab the value. Okay, so that's exactly the response you got on the website. So somebody can actually be using the website, these tools that OpenAI has provided, and then programmatically you can go in and tap into that if this is for your company, your organization, or for whatever testing you want to do. Also on this, let's see if I can get to it. It's annotation. Yeah, there we go. So here's all the annotations, right? So all these pieces here, these annotations, that also gets entered into the thread for that message. That's what OpenAI does for you. That's why this new model is absolutely incredible. One of the reasons that it's very incredible. So you can sit here and have a conversation. It can do all these pieces, and then you can take it, skin it, and render it any way you want. So that's pretty cool, I think. Any more questions at the moment? So far, so good. Looks interesting. Waste of time. Now, as we're talking about that, so the fact that I turned on retrieval, this is a little more expensive. Actually, the retrieval piece is more expensive than the other pieces. It's like 20 cents per day per gigabyte for the number of files you do, because it has to do the embeddings for it. We'll take a look at the code interpreter in a second. That's a little less expensive, and then just using the model is less. I forget what it is. It's on par, maybe a little more as expensive as the older ones, but we're talking about 0.002 cents, maybe 3 cents, depending on the model you're using. So the models differ in the sense of accuracy, right? So the latest one here is the most accurate, but it may not be as fast as the GPT-3 turbo modes, but then those are not as accurate. So depending on the application you're building for yourself or for a company, those costs will vary. If you start loading up tons of files, that's where your expenses are going to really come in, because not only are you paying for the storage, but you're also paying for how the retrieval works. So let's do, what else we got? So no questions? People still on board with this? Not everybody's punching out the same time. So what I want to do is, I like this one. So I have a CSV file, right? So it's got like handful of properties, right? A bunch of data. And what I'm going to do is let's create a new one. And I'm going to call it Sales Analyst. And we'll say you are a personal sales assistant. Answer the questions based on the attached file. We'll pick the model. We'll pick the latest and greatest. Let's see. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to enable the code interpreter. Okay. And what that is a sandbox Python interpreter. Again, all I'm doing here, all the things I'm doing are all doable from the command line. So let's add another file. Let's grab that April CSV. Let's clear what we were doing. And I'm going to ask it to please give some insight. So I'm going to be a minimal, let's save it. Please give some insight. Let's kick it off. It's a minimal effort prompt. So who knows where it's going to go, living dangerously. And you can see it's going to call the code interpreter. Again, you'll get these messages and you'll see these messages in what gets responded to you. You don't have to print this out. Yay. So right off the bat, we get a module not found, but that's okay. This is an autonomous agent in essence. So what it's going to do, it's going to retry. It seems the magic module is not available in this environment. Now, I just tried this last night, early this morning, just because I was trying some new things on with it, and it worked. So now, it had a problem. Said we had a problem, and did I put up the right file? Yeah. So it failed. So it's going to still have an issue. It's going to read the contents, and we'll proceed by reading and outputting the first several lines. Let's see if that works. Maybe my minimal effort prompt was caused me more issues than I hoped, but let's see. So that's pretty cool. So finally got it. So it solved the problem, hit 2 issues, solved it on the 3rd try, and those in fact are headings in the CSV file: transaction ID, store, and not only that, but it does like a typical data science person, and it says, let's print out the first few rows, and it finds that a store has a status of active, and they're all active. Yep. It finds out the transaction date, that there's a transaction date, there's a plan, and it says silver, gold, bronze, and yep, you can see, so it did some analysis already on the plan column. So it figured out, let's say, a little bit of a pivot table, figured out all the unique values, and it went down the path. Now let's ask another question. Let's see what we have. Let's see if we can say what store had the most transactions, and I'm just going to say TRX. Let's see if it knows enough to. So that's the other cool thing, is now we have a natural language interface to our file, right? So I can try and shortcut the words. It'll try to figure out, because it's a great text completer. So there you go. I'm not going to check and see if that's correct. Again, back to the hallucination question. This particular approach will have fewer hallucinations because it's actually, in fact, writing code. So when I expand the code interpreter, we're actually looking at Python, which I could copy paste to my local machine and try to run. So that's pretty cool. Now, what time is it? It's almost lunchtime here in New York City. So let's say chart transactions by store. So I want a chart. I always hit enter and think I've got it, but they don't have a shortcut key for that. But anyway, so click on the add and run. So chart transaction by store. So remember, this is now keeping track of all the conversation. So I can be, as I get further in the conversation, it has context and memory, so to speak. And it looks starting to look good already. Okay. I happen to know that Python using matplotlib is great. And there we have our transactions by store. Notice San Francisco was the largest, and it said it was 34, and we're good to go. That's pretty impressive, I think. Let's go back to the file system, and I have something called get. What do I want to do now? Yeah, so yeah, let's do a get OAI message. We'll give it a thread ID and a variable. And these are all the messages we just have. So the last message should have my image. Now notice, just from looking at what came out, right, I can see that the content is of type image file, so on and so forth. So let's drill in there a bit. Let's go after the first message. Let's go after the content. And sure enough, it shows that here's a file ID, right? So everything works off IDs, thread IDs, assistant IDs, run IDs, image IDs, or file IDs, because this happens to be an image, but it supports numerous images. It supports Excel files, Word docs, PDFs, so on and so forth. So if you're asking questions like, hey, take this PDF and translate it to a markdown, it will not give you an image file, but it'll give you that target type file. So let's see if I can, so I have something called get, OAI file content. So that looks like get content, I hope. And takes a file ID, perfect. So let's give it the file ID, and I'm gonna give it an out file. I'm gonna call it /test.png. Let's spell that correctly, test.png. Okay, didn't get an error. That doesn't mean it's good. Let's try and run it up. And there's the graph we just created. So we created all the goodies. We created a new assistant, named it, gave it instructions, a model, gave it a code interpreter, gave it a file, asked a bunch of questions, and then I'm able to retrieve that locally. Again, I can do all of what I just did that I typed in, all from the command line. Or I could back end a Azure service that can take all this good stuff, make it happen, and then I can programmatically grab all that stuff that comes out of a conversation, whether it's files, annotations, just the pure text, the whole conversation, on and on and on. So this is really the next level of what we're going to see. We're going to see if AWS, how they answer this, Anthropic, how they'll answer it, how Bard and Gemini will answer it, and the rest of the big players. So it's really cool stuff. And now I have it, so I can do it in my scripts. I can augment my scripts to have natural language interfaces, do this kind of stuff in the background, and then provide different kinds of results. Question, can you use the PowerShell Scott plot instead of Python? Good question. No, it can't use it directly because this is a code interpreter. It's a sandbox up on their servers to do that. So you can't do it that way, but let me see if I can say, give me a PowerShell file to do this. Thanks for the session. I did drop. We'll try to watch the recording. Thanks, Stefan. Would love your feedback. If you have any, get on the YouTube. I will post this in the next week. Give me a PowerShell file to do this. There we go. Well, nice limited prompt. So who knows what it'll figure out. So it's kind of cool. It goes back to the interpreter. I think it actually tries to create the PowerShell in a string. Let's see what it comes up with. So no, you cannot do it directly. But you might be able, what I would do, can use it, thanks, you're welcome. So how I would approach it at this point is I could ask it for the actual data that it had, give me that data in PowerShell, and then locally I can then run it through Scotplot. Right, so there's ways to start it. One of the reasons I build these tools for myself and others is that now I can start to have intuitions about it and say, okay, maybe I can't directly do this, but how can I get it to get to a certain point? And then I can actually pull that data down locally. And instead of just doing a PNG, I can do an interactive chart in another package. So I can ask it for the data already crunched and ready to go. So it looks like Code Interpreter went off to lunch. That's very unfortunate. Not good for a demo. Let's just take a look at the documentation. So the API reference, right? So this is what I've used as my model, as well as talking to lots of people at OpenAI and forums. Here's all of the assistance threads, messages, and runs, how it all works. What I want you to draw your attention here is notice everything says beta. right? So not only is OpenAI still a research concept to a degree, even though Microsoft is rolling out OpenAI services, they're taking older models that are tried and tested, but this whole new thing is all beta, which means there are going to be missing pieces. There are going to be things that don't work, and there are going to be changes because it's beta and things are going to happen. So I look at it as, if you want to get involved, you have to pay the innovation tax. And I'm more than happy to pay the innovation tax, because when I see certain things like this, it's super cool. And I think it's worth knowing. So hopefully you're here to learn why it's cool, and you'll see it the same way. Merlin says, regardless of model quality, do you know if Google or another vendor offer similar functionalities like OpenAI does with a playground and code and samples? Good question. So other than OpenAI, do other vendors offer this kind of stuff? I believe that the AWS Q, as well as the Gemini piece, they'll be releasing next week, at least in the Google Gemini. They're going to release an API similar to so that you programmatically can get to this. They're also going to have their own playground approach, and I believe a lot of their stuff all works in collab notebooks, and they're setting those up, or have set those up, so that you can easily get involved with that and work it. So yeah, great question. This is the AI wars have. I would like to hear your feedback on that too. So the cool thing about this is the AI wars, the race is on, and now it's going to come down to all kinds of basically. Did I just do that wrong? Yeah, that's a bummer. We're going to see everybody's going to try to outdo each other. Meta's coming out with new pieces with their Llama Index and their open source. AWS has Q. Google now finally released Gemini, and there's a lot of questions about how they released it and what they released and its capabilities. Elon Musk and X have released from XAI Grok, and they're also going to have an API interface and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a race. It's like the cloud races, but more. It's going to be really interesting, because if you lock into one and somebody out innovates, it's going to be interesting to see if you can switch. And can I ask it to create a PDF for the output and provide the link? So yes, I've done. So that's what Ian asks. Can I ask for a PDF and get the output? I've done that with, where did I do that? I believe I did that with ChatGPT Web, when they integrated all of these different pieces into one. So if you're in ChatGPT Web and you paid it $20 a month, you can do exactly that. You can ask. You can give it data, ask it questions. It can go out and crunch a bunch of stuff. It also has Bing search attached to it, so you can ask all types of stuff, and at the end say, give me a PDF document, and it will then crunch it, provide it, give you a link, click it, and download. All those pieces are coming to the playground. Again, ChatGPT Web and this use the same API. This is a beta product at this point. So. But with the PowerShell module, absolutely. So before, when I showed you, let's see if we can do this. Right, so here's the content. Let's see if I can do an FL. The right stuff. Yeah, this is all REST API. So everything, I return as much of the pieces as they provide that they would use. So yes, you can do this with the PowerShell module. Let's go into text. So this is the one I did about, there's nothing. So you see where annotations are? Right? In there will be all the annotations, including the file amounts, the file IDs, right? So like here, they happen to put it just in the image file. Okay. But so you can either grab it from the image file that gets produced on what's returned via the PowerShell SDK, or you can find stuff in the annotations to grab file IDs and so on. So you need to build that code. I present you with the data that comes back. So yeah, and I'm working at building more abstractions to make that even easier. But yes, you can do that. Again, you can skin. If you have an SDK that gives you the basics into the 4 primitives, you're off to the races. And now just a matter of revving this module to make things even easier. So for example, what I'm going to do here is I can do get OpenAI Assistant, right? So here's all the assistants that we just worked with today. And now I can do something like remove OpenAI Assistant, and that will delete everything I just did. So again, it looks like it's like a dir and then delete everything and then pipe that into remove. So it's the same concepts. Now I see this as taking it up to the next level where I can say something like function, clear, assistants, right? Then I'll build that into the module, things like that. Same thing with files. So yeah, if you want to so now to interact with the response from the models or the messages on the thread, and to figure out the different, what all the text messages that came back and all the annotations and all the files, providing helper functions to do that is where I'm going, because this is going to be part of my toolkit. Being able to plug these things into your PowerShell scripts or build solutions. Why does it have to be just in Python, right? In my opinion, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you want to do in Python, yeah, but there's Python and PowerShell are tuned for different things, and sometimes PowerShell makes perfect sense just to go forward and do it. So good to go. All right, Dion, thanks for coming. It is 12. It is the hour. Glad you liked it. Awesome. Please follow me on X platform. Give me feedback. You can do it through the Meetup. You can do it through the GitHub repos or on YouTube. I also see this as a community project. Enjoy your weekend, folks. Thanks for joining.